Let's welcome back to the programme. He's not been on for ages. He's an outstanding guy, he really is. He's an anarcho-capitalist, he's a libertarian, a freedom fighter against man's two biggest enemies, the state and the central banks. He's an excellent broadcaster as well. He really is. You can find him at the website dollarvigilante.com. Anarchapulco is a conference that he runs. It's a massive conference attended by people from all over the world. That's imminent as well. We'll talk about that. Let's welcome back to our show our old friend, the dollar vigilante himself, Jeff Berwick. Jeff, welcome back. How are you?
Thank you, Richie. Yeah, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm brilliant. You're winding me up again, Jeff. I'm looking behind
you.
What
did I do this time?
That wonderful view behind. See, Jeff is on camera, folks. And behind him, well, it's a view to die for. Jeff, I look out at grim old Manchester. Gloomy old Manchester. Listen, mate, it's brilliant to have you back on. You know I love what you do. It's incredibly interesting. It's incredibly important. Obviously going to talk about Bitcoin. Jeff, the market volatility we've seen over the last couple of days, and people saying that they're worried about interest rises. I heard an economist tell the BBC today, very early this morning in fact, that paradoxically, he said, the economy is on the up and up, or it seems to be on the up and up, but he said sometimes that scares the markets. Now, Jeff, I don't have your experience, but I smelled bullshit. What was that all about?
Yeah, well, you're totally right on smelling bullshit. That's what they do. All these things that they do is when they're saying these sort of things is sort of to lead people mostly astray, really. You should almost always do the opposite of whatever the Federal Reserve or the central banks are saying. And they've, of course, had interest rates near 0% now since 2008. We're now in 2018. That's 10 years of basically 0% interest rates. It's a 0.5% or something like that. But it's actually negative interest rates when you take into account inflation. The actual money supply printing of the Federal Reserve is still around 8% per year. So your average person is actually losing about 7% per year in terms of purchasing power, which they not necessarily haven't seen yet because it takes a little while to filter into the economy, and that's the whole ruse with the whole inflation game. But you're right. This is just total BS, and they have their plans. The Federal Reserve and the central bank have been doing this for about a decade, since the Federal Reserve was founded in 2013. The Great Depression in 1929 was completely orchestrated by the central bank. They boosted the money supply massively in the 1920s, all by design, got everyone thinking, oh, this is a new boom era, we should all be investing in stocks, all the stocks are going up. The reason the stocks are going up is because they were buying them, the Federal Reserve and their cronies, and they were printing so much money, so all that money went into the stock market, and on purpose, and this is all documented now, back in 1929, they rescinded the money supply, caused the Great Depression, and bought up everything at pennies on the dollar. And that's what they're going to do again. And I don't know if it has started yet, but it was very interesting to me, Richie, that we had a 666-point drop, a very interesting number, on the 33rd day of the year, which was on Friday, which 33 is a very Masonic number. It's the most important number in Freemasonry, and of course the U.S. itself was essentially founded all by Freemasons. All of Washington D.C. is laid out with Freemason architecture and layout. You look at the back of the $1 bill in the U.S. It's got a pyramid with an all-seeing eye on it. They've got their stamp right on there. So I said that when I saw that it was down 666 points on Friday, on the 33rd day of the year, to me that was a very clear signal that they are going to start putting things into action this year. We've been waiting for this next crash. It's been long overdue. We've had a massive rise in the stock market, all due to this money printing. And we'll see in the next few days. Well, of course, yesterday we had over 1,000-point drop on the Dow, which isn't even that much anymore because the Dow is now around 25,000. But in the old days, a 1,000-point drop was unheard of, and it was the largest point drop in history. We'll see what happens. The market's a little up today, which is totally normal, but we'll see if they're going to crash the economy again like they did in 2008, like they did it in 2001, like they did it in 1929.
Brilliant stuff, Jeff. Yeah, the acid grab that you and I have spoken about before, you know, grabbing real wealth through these crashes, these manipulated crashes. So, Jeff, if they decide to raise interest rates, now again, I'm not in any way patronising you when I say you know a lot more about this stuff than I do. I used to do interviews, I was always the go-to guy back in my commercial radio days. If there was an economist on, get Richie to interview him, because Richie has a little bit of an insight. That wasn't necessarily true, but I had some little insight. When they talk about rising interest rates, the little guy, Jeff, absolutely has a panic attack, because he thinks, I'm going to get done here. I'm going to, the mortgage is going to get more difficult to pay. Rents are going to go up and my salary isn't going to go up. Are they going to raise interest rates? Or if they do raise interest rates, is that a massive red flag? Is that an alarm bell?
Well, we should point out, first of all, that they should not be in charge of deciding the interest rate of the entire market. This is the whole scam of central banking. This is called the manipulation of interest rates, and interest rates really is the price of money. That's how you tell what the price of money is, but they skew it by controlling and manipulating everything, and also counterfeiting money, which they call just money printing. So these things that no one should be actually doing, manipulation and counterfeiting, that's all they do. That's their whole job. And you're absolutely right. When what they do in all these cycles, and these cycles usually seem to happen in about 7-year cycles. I've talked about the Shemitah in the past. They will actually lower the interest rates. They'll get everyone into debt. They will really promote and market all kinds of debt instruments and mortgages. And of course, mortgage is French, direct translation, death contract. They will get everyone into their death contracts, get them in at 0%, 1%, and then they'll raise the rates, and then most people, not most people, but a lot of people won't be able to pay it, and they'll end up having to give their homes back to the bank. And this is what they do over and over again. And the question is, are they going to continue to raise interest rates? If they do, it will absolutely destroy the economy as we know it today, because this economy has been built on 10 years of free money, 0% interest rates. If interest rates were to even rise to 5%, nearly everything would be bankrupt, including the U.S. government, which now has over $20 trillion in debt, way higher than where it was even when Barack Drone Bomber, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, when he came into office in 2008, there was about $8 trillion in debt. So we've had over a double in the last 10 years. This is Banana Republic type levels. But if you look at the total debt, it's over $20 trillion. Now they have Donald Trump in, the small government man who actually has increased the U.S. government deficits. He talks on TV, and a lot of people still watch TV, unfortunately, television programming, and it's called programming for a reason. He talks about, I'm going to lower the interest rate, lower your tax rate and help you. First of all, they haven't really lowered any tax rates. If they do, it's just a small amount, but they continue to go into massive deficits. So all they're doing is taking away from the taxes of what they're extorting people, and they're actually just devaluing their money, which is a hidden tax through inflation. So nothing's changed there. But if you look at the $20 trillion, let's just do the math, make it easy. Let's say interest rates go to 10%, and 10% is not a crazy number by historic means. We've seen central banks, even the U.S. central bank, numerous times at 10% interest rates. So if you do the math on that, $20 trillion at 10% interest rate, the U.S. government would have to pay $2 trillion per year in interest. And that is almost the entire budget of the U.S. government. So all of the money that they spend actually on things like wars, the Department of Defense, the Pentagram, and things like that, none of that would be handled by the budget anymore. It would all go just to pay interest on the debt. So this is the end game that I've been talking about for a number of years. I said in 2010, when I started the Dollar Vigilante, that by the end of this decade, all of this stuff will fall apart. This will be a complete collapse situation. We'll see banks collapse. We'll see economies just go to basically almost to zero for a period of time. We'll see currencies collapse. And very interesting, Richie, I don't know if you know about the front cover of the Rothschild-owned Economist magazine. In 1988, 30 years ago, they said 2018, get ready for a new world currency. And we could be seeing this going into play this year, where they collapse everything. All the currencies collapse, including the U.S. dollar. And then they come out with their savior currency, which will likely be something like the special drawing rights, the SDR, which will likely be cryptocurrency, interestingly enough. And then they will try to get everyone using that. And then they'll have every transaction on Earth being tracked and taxed. So that's the end game of this. That's your cashless society right there. So, absolutely. Jeff, is the recent depreciation in the value of Bitcoin, how does that relate to your belief? And I didn't know about that magazine article in 1988. Thanks for
educating me on that. That's amazing, and it makes perfect sense, of course. So is that related then, the depreciation in value of Bitcoin, related to their plans to collapse currencies and introduce their own cryptocurrency?
Everything, of course, in today's day and age is related, and definitely the cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin have been a huge recipient of all this money printing. That's essentially where a lot of the free money that's been printed in the last few years has all been going into cryptocurrencies. So we saw cryptocurrencies about a year ago, the entire market capitalization, including Bitcoin, of all the cryptocurrencies. I'm going to look it up because it's so crazy. It's so low. I just want to make sure I'm right on this. But the entire market cap of all cryptocurrencies 1 year ago today was under $20 billion. It's currently about $360 billion. A month ago, it was $800 billion. So we've seen this massive rise. As I pointed out, a lot of the money that's been out there, just like we saw in the dot-com bubble in the 1990s, a lot of the money went into tech stocks. In 2008, a lot of the money went into real estate and death contracts. Then they pulled the plug. This time, a lot of that money has gone into cryptocurrencies. So yes, it's related, but this isn't all part of their plans. In fact, a lot of these cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, are the only chance we have to stop them from doing what they're doing, because it actually gives the power of money back to the people. And if people start using cryptocurrencies across the world, then that will massively lower the ability of the central banks to do anything. And when you take away the power from the central banks, you take away the power from a lot of these governments. They won't be able to do most of the things they do, because a lot of that is paid for by the inflation and the manipulation of interest rates of central banks. So we're in an interesting situation here where we have the cryptocurrencies coming down massively in the last month, at the same time as we're now seeing the stock market starting to crack, and now we're hearing rumors or talk about them raising interest rates now. To me, it was very interesting that in the last couple months, you saw the mainstream media actually get quite on board with Bitcoin. It was on CNBC all the time. They were talking about how high it could go, $100,000, $1 million. That's what they do. That's part of the way they manipulate markets is through their media.
Infomercials, Jeff. Infomercials disguised as news. It's a wonderful ruse, isn't it? Wonderful stuff. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you, but that's what it is. It's an infomercial. I saw those reports about Bitcoin. They were almost, begging their viewers to invest or to try and get involved with Bitcoin. You're right, Jeff. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's what they did. And in hindsight, I could see that's what they were doing. I did mention in the last few months, I told with Bitcoin rising well over 10,000, when it was at near $20,000, I said to take some profits. This is a massive spike that is gone parabolic. We're going to see definitely a pullback from here. Now we've seen that Bitcoin's now currently around $7,000. So they brought in their marketing hype right around the time that they actually put Bitcoin futures live on the CMOE so that they can actually trade through their Wall Street funds Bitcoin. So right at the same time as that futures happened, I think what happened is they loaded up on futures, went long Bitcoin, promoted it through all their media, and what happened likely is once it hit around 20,000, they decided to start selling the futures, and then all of a sudden all the media came out, Bitcoin might be a scam, this is a scam, you better get out, you better be careful. It's very typical what they're doing. So they're definitely involved in this market now, and this is the first time we've seen that. So, a lot of the things that have been happening in the last few months is because they've begun to get involved in this market.
Our guest is Jeff Berwick. You know Jeff very well. Amazing guy. DollarVigilante.com, live from Acapulco. It's great to have Jeff back on the program. It's been a long time. Jeff, I'm not going to argue with you about Bitcoin and the cashless society. We've had that argument before. My listeners know my take on it. For me, and I don't have any gold or any silver, Jeff, I don't have the money, but for me, those tangible assets and cash are king. Because while I do believe you that those behind Bitcoin, that they're the real deal, they're genuine, and their motives are benevolent, I just worry about it, Jeff, that it's still there to be got at. It's still there. It would be easier to go after that than it is to go after your silver, your gold, and your hard cash. That's all I'm going to say on that, but you can shoot me down there. Go ahead.
Well, you might be surprised to find out, Richie, and you might not have been paying attention to what I've been saying for the last couple of months, but I've been saying that they have started to infiltrate Bitcoin now. We've actually seen essentially the most powerful people in Bitcoin is a company called Blockstream, which is actually generally owned by the same people who run Bilderberg. And they have come in and they have started to convince a lot of people that Bitcoin doesn't have to be fast, it doesn't have to be cheap anymore. They've increased essentially, they've done things that have made it so that the cost of transferring Bitcoin has gone up dramatically, and they've started to promote it as being a digital gold because what they want, the last thing they want, these banksters, whatever you want to call them, Illuminati banksters, Zionists, Jesuits, Masons, they're all different tentacles of the same octopus. What they want is control of the money. It was the Rothschilds who said in the 1800s or even 1700s, it was a long time ago, that I care not who makes the laws, I care who controls the money, and I control the money. And that's what they've decided centuries ago, is that they wanted to control the money, and through that they can influence all the governments in the world, which they still do to this day, through their essentially running of these central banks. So the last thing they want is a currency to get out there that they can't control, and that was Bitcoin. And they've nefariously managed to get into it to some extent so far and slow it down. And they keep talking about now it's a digital gold. So you should think about it as gold, but you can never use it as an actual currency. This is what they want, because if we as people start using a currency that they can't control, the whole game's over. The entire house of cards collapses. And so they've actually infiltrated to some extent into Bitcoin so far. So you might not know this, Richie, but I've actually been one of the loudest people talking about this and saying that this has happened and that we should be very careful. We should even be looking at alternative cryptocurrencies, since they've somehow managed to infiltrate to some extent Bitcoin. Now, they haven't completely infiltrated. It's not like anyone can ever control Bitcoin or own it, but they've managed to influence enough power and into the space where it's convinced a lot of people to go in the direction that they are wanting it to go, which is not as a currency. So
I'm going to tweet your article, Jeff. Jeff has written about this on dollarvigilante.com. Has Bitcoin been compromised? It's very good. I was aware of it, Jeff. I was speaking tongue-in-cheek. I was on your website today reading your articles, and I'm delighted that you're putting that out there for people to think about that. I'm going to tweet that out while we're talking, and I don't want to be jumping backwards and forwards between things, but I have a feeling that a lot of what we're seeing today, FTSE Dow, what you've been talking about Bitcoin, I have a feeling that a lot of this has to do with the whole Brexit thing. And I'll tell you why I think that. Obviously, in recent weeks and months, we've seen anti-European Union parties gather momentum in countries like Italy and in other countries around Europe. Obviously, the United Kingdom took the vote to leave. There's a real pushback against that by the European Union bureaucracy. But I have a feeling that these Jesuits, Masons, brilliantly described by you, Zionists, whatever you want to call them, they're desperate, Jeff, not to allow the United Kingdom leave the European Union. And I think a lot of the volatility, even Bitcoin coming down and the interference you talked about, it must have something to do with Brexit. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, everything's fairly related. And I commented a lot on Brexit at the time. And I said that what I actually think happened during Brexit is they actually allowed it to go through because there was so many people getting so upset about all this globalism and the EU control of everything in Europe that they couldn't just fix the vote like they normally do and get away with it. There was too much uproar. So I think it's very similar to Donald Trump. I think they're allowing things like Brexit, the Brexit vote to go through for Brexit, and allowing Trump to get into office as this savior who's going to change everything, who hasn't changed anything yet whatsoever, to give people the idea that they have some sort of power or control, or that they have some say in things, and that's the whole democracy sort of thing. But I also said, right as soon as Brexit happened, I said, I'll bet they won't actually fully let it happen. They'll let this go on for years. They'll use all kinds of tactics. They'll crash the economy and then say, oh, that's because you're trying to do Brexit, so you better not do it now. So these are all ongoing things. As people try to keep from going towards this globalist route, they're just trying, and as you pointed out, and I think you're quite right, they're quite desperate. Thanks to the internet, thanks to shows like yours, thanks to thousands of others getting this information out there, people are somewhat waking up now and starting to realize that something is wrong about what's going on here. And as they're doing it, these people, the elites, if you want to call them that, are having to find different ways to try to make things go their way. So yeah, absolutely, Brexit is totally tied to this. And of course, you've seen the Catalonia thing in Spain, and there's numerous. What do they call it when a country leaves from another country? Secessionist movements. There's numerous of those going on all over the place, and we're watching on the internet grandmothers getting beaten by cops in Catalonia as they go to vote for secession. And of course, Richie, if you know me, you know my favorite saying is, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And I'd like to see secessionist movements go down until there's 7 billion free individual government people in the world, and there is no overarching one world government or even smaller governments. I'd like to see it go in that direction. That's the exact opposite direction of where they want to see it go. But you're quite right. All these things are very tied together. Most people can't connect all the dots on them. I know you're friends with David Icke, and he's one of the best dot connectors out there. I learned a lot of dot connecting from him. And to me, having more of a financial and monetary sort of knowledge, I can connect, and political as well, I can connect a lot of these dots and see what's going on. And yes, it's absolutely all related. And it's really that there's a lot of people starting to wake up, and they want a little bit of freedom, and they're trying to stop it everywhere they can. They're putting out fires everywhere they can. And we'll see what happens in the next few years. If it goes their direction, we end up with a one world government and a one world cryptocurrency, which they control, can inflate at will, and can tax everyone on every single transaction. We will have tyranny on Earth like we've never known it. But if we can go another direction where we have other cryptocurrencies, which they can't even track whatsoever, there's numerous privacy coins out there like Monero and Zcash. You can't even tell who has what. And if people start using that and they can't tax it anymore, and if they start using that currency more and more, and they stop using currencies like the US dollar or the euro, this whole house of cards of this entire one world government control enslavement system that they've been working on for centuries goes away very quickly.
It comes down, you're right, Jeff. I'm obviously an Irishman. There's no hiding this outrageous accent. I come from the Republic of Ireland. And when I talk to people back home who know me from my commercial radio days and think that I'm a nutty conspiracy theorist now, I ask them, I say, are you okay with the fact that when the Irish government releases or wants to release a budget, wants to produce its spending plans for the year, it must get permission from Germany? Are you happy with that? And you know, Stockholm Syndrome is an amazing thing, Jeff, because some of them will say, oh well, Jesus, we had it so good for so many years, we lived beyond our means. Jeff, I want to strangle them to death. We lived, you didn't live beyond your means. And you know, I know you must be following this Carillion scandal here in the UK. I mean, talk about Stockholm Syndrome. Here you have a massive company that was given huge construction projects by the UK government, even after it issued 3 major profit warnings. And not only that, but the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, a guy called George Osborne, he consulted with a hedge fund managing company in America, and they were making bets that Carillion stock would fall. So they obviously had inside information that the company was worthless, and yet the English government kept giving it billions and billions of pounds for contracts, even though the company was collapsing. Jeff, there's never been a more obvious case of fraud, of insider trading. And you know what, Jeff? People will go and watch the soccer. When are they going to get up, Jeff, off their arses and take to the streets and say, enough's enough now, we've had enough?
I think, unfortunately, it's going to take a major collapse to shake people out of this stupor. And you kind of pointed out that people are open to this idea that we've lived beyond our means and these sort of things, and we deserve, to be more enslaved now.
Yeah.
when you look at your average person, they're born, and not to mention that a lot of men or little boys, a few days into life, have like a lot of the skin off their penis chopped off in a very traumatic event, which will make it so they never have a full sexual life ever again and never can fully experience true connection with a woman, in my opinion, and I'm circumcised myself. Then they inject them with about 30 vaccines before their immune system is even developed, essentially sentencing them to a life of illness, which will only enhance and make profits for the pharmaceutical industry. Then as soon as they can just start walking around and start talking, they get thrown into a government indoctrination camp for 12 years and get fed mostly propaganda. In the U.S., they do their Pledge of Allegiance every morning. You got the picture of the president on the wall, which I don't care if it's Trump or Bush or Obama or anyone. It might as well be Little Kim from North Korea. It's the exact same thing to me. When I look at that, it creeps the heck out of me. But that's exactly what they're doing. Then they go home, and what do? They turn on their television programming. And David Icke talked a lot about this. In fact, I learned some of the stuff I know about this from him. That is just a mind brainwashing, hypnotizing machine, and they just sit there all night and they get all this propaganda goes into their heads. So it's no doubt and it's no surprise that your average person really has no idea what's going on, not to mention the fluoride in the water in the U.S. And I could go on and on about how they've been taking out the nutrition from all the food that your average person eats. And it just go on and on. So it's really not a surprise that your average person is like this. Unfortunately, from my experience, I think it's going to take something major having to happen to a lot of people, losing a lot of things, before they start to wake up, because your average person, it appears, is happy being a comfortable slave. As long as they've got their air conditioner and their car, even if they're paying for it for 6 years, and their house, even if they're paying for it for 50 years in a death contract, and they can watch their football games, as you pointed out, your average person is not willing to change as long as they have those sort of basic things. So I think it's going to take quite a big crisis for your average person to wake up. But the good news is, Richie, that we don't need everyone to wake up in order to change this. In fact, all we need to do is create new systems that make the old government and central bank systems obsolete, and people won't even know that we've gotten rid of government and central banks. They'll just start using things like, for example, cryptocurrencies. And we've talked about Bitcoin, but there's many other cryptocurrencies. If people start just using those things, very quickly they'll be like, oh, this is way better, it's way easier, it's way faster, it's way cheaper, and hey, I actually control it. That's kind of interesting. And before you know it, that'll take the power away from the central banks, which really takes the power away from the governments, and the world will change. It's very much like all the changes that we've seen in the last 20 years. For example, the largest hotel company in the world is Airbnb. They own no hotels. The largest retailer in the world is Amazon. They have no retail shops except for a couple. The largest taxi company in the world is Uber. They own no taxis. And if you ask your average person who didn't notice before how crappy the government taxis are and how unhappy the drivers are and how crappy they treat you, once they start using Uber, they're like, hey, there's like a button on my phone and I press it and this is way better. It's actually cheaper. The service is way better. And the guy actually knows where to go. I don't have to explain it to him with like a paper map or anything like that. So that's an example of how you've kind of almost gotten rid of government taxi systems almost across the world without having to educate people about why it's better to have private markets rather than these government-run markets. And the government, of course, also is involved with central banks. So we could see by creating these new systems, and people are creating them all the time right now thanks to the internet, where we could change these systems without your average person even knowing these changes are happening. And if it goes far enough, we could eventually reach a day in the next 5, 10, 20, 50 years, whatever the amount is, where we actually don't really have any central banks left, and governments are either small or non-existent and don't really destroy the economy anymore like they used to, and your average person won't even know why they went away. That's the beautiful thing, and that's really the answer, in my opinion, is creating these new systems, and that's why, to me, the cryptocurrency market is so important.
It's a race, Jeff, isn't it? Because in the meantime, they're planning financial crisis after financial crisis, and each one results in a massive transfer of what we call real wealth, land, of course, and most importantly, land and property. So it's a race, and you think that if they get away with it, that the next crash will be Armageddon. And this is not to scaremonger people, it isn't, but it's to watch out. And this sort of volatility we've seen, now we're not saying that this is the beginning of something, it might not be, but the next one, you've said it, I think, one or two other economists that I've come to know over the years of making programs like this, they reckon the next one is going to make what happened in 2008 look Mickey Mouse, basically.
Absolutely. The Great Depression in 1929, next one will be called the Greatest Depression. It will be remembered for history after it. You just look at the numbers, because really briefly, Richie, if you just look at what happened, they really took over the money system in 1913 with the founding of the Federal Reserve, which was put in basically on Christmas Eve. I believe the president at the time was Woodrow Wilson, and as soon as he got out of office, he said, "I feel so bad, I essentially sold my country to the banksters." He knew he had done that. They actually put in the income tax that very year because that was all part of their plan. There was no income tax in the U.S. until 1913. And then they did this big thing. They went through the Great Depression. They collapsed everything. And then what happened on 1933, right after all that? Well, now we have to take away everyone's gold because so they actually, in the U.S., the land of the free, in 1933, they made it illegal for private citizens to own gold. This is all part of their plan to get, because gold is personal power sort of money. They can't control it, same as some cryptocurrencies. So then they built it up again. Then they went into World War II, mostly all contrived again, in my opinion. This is what they do. They create these sort of things to scare people and give their power away to the governments. Then they actually bankrupted the U.S. government again with the Vietnam War, which was all based off of a false flag in the Gulf of Tonkin. And killed millions of people over it, which they love. These people are very evil. They love all this stuff that they do. They line their pockets with all the war profits, and then they were so bankrupt by 1971, August 15th, that Richard Nixon, that other great president, went on the television programming and said that they're going to have to take any gold backing away from the dollar. This is after they had already made it illegal for Americans to even have gold. And since that date in 1971, we've actually been on a completely fiat currency system backed by nothing. There's nothing backing any government currencies in the world. There used to be a couple. Switzerland retained some gold backing until a few years ago, but now there's none. There's no government currency that has any backing.
Yeah, if this is the greatest tyranny, can I just interject? Isn't this because your job, and you do an amazing job, is bringing this to the masses, is bringing this to people who would never hear this. And you do I'm certainly not buttering you up, you do an amazing job. Isn't this the way in to the perplexed, to the man and woman getting their news from CBS or Fox or CNN? They know something is wrong, they just can't put a finger on it. We need to tell them how the financial system runs in the world, because it's very easy to explain. Very easy. The Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Warburgs and the Oppenheimers and these people, they basically invent money, loan money into existence out of thin air, charge interest on it that you can never pay back, and through that they have accrued all the real wealth on planet Earth. It can be proven. Is this central, this one issue, to waking people up to what's going on, Jeff?
Yes, it is, but because they haven't never been taught anything about economics or the monetary system, how it works in their government indoctrination camps, or even if you go to college. If you go to college in the U.S. or probably in the U.K. and you take economics, you will never actually be taught how the money system works. This is all on purpose. And if you try to talk to your average person about it, as soon as you say economics, they just close their eyes, because they've been told, actually, this is all on purpose, that economics is very complicated and you need people like Ben Bernanke with these big blackboards with all these formulas. Economics is very, very simple. All it is essentially is people trading. So if you make a pencil and I make food, and you want a pencil and you want food, we exchange. That's all economics is. And of course, then you can use money so that if you don't need a pencil, but you still want to be able to sell your food to me, that we have another means of exchange. That's basically it. You can actually teach economics and money in a few minutes to your average person. In fact, there's a book out there. It's the greatest book. If anyone out there wants to just understand everything they need to know about economics, it's called Economics in One Lesson. I believe it's Harry Brown Brown, or I actually forget who wrote it, but it's like a little pamphlet this big. It teaches you everything you need to know about economics. But kind of getting back to my point about my short history lesson there of what's been going on from 1913 and the 1971 ticking away of gold from all the backing from the currencies, is we've since then have every government in the world gone very socialist, and I know you kind of like that word for whatever reason, but they've gone into a lot of spending, a lot of welfare state, a lot of all these sort of things, and a lot of wealth redistribution. So they take money from some people and give it to other people. Those things can't last on their own, but because they can print the money, every government, I don't know any governments who actually have a profit. I think there's one or two in the world. Every other government just goes into debt every year, and that's because there's nothing backing the money, so they can just continue to print the money. So we're at the stage now where we've had 40 years of governments printing money and going more and more into debt. And if you look at the U.S. government, which I know the best because it's the largest, you just look at everything they have, it's all bankrupt. The Social Security system is absolutely bankrupt. They say this themselves. I think the most recent numbers is it'll be completely bankrupt next decade. I think it'll be sooner than that. In fact, it's bankrupt right now. If they couldn't print money, it's over right now. The Medicare, that's all bankrupt. Even the backing of insurance of money in banks called the FDIC, that was bankrupt years ago. Everything's bankrupt. So anyone who kind of really knows economics and financials and understands what's going on just knows that, yes, the next collapse that happens, when it happens, and it could be this year, and I'm thinking it is going to be this year, but what I've seen in the last few days, is it's going to wipe everything out because everything is based on debt now. Everyone's in debt. Everyone's got a death contract. Hardly anyone owns their car. It's all a lease or a loan. Credit card debts are at highs. Student loan debts to go to useless college for the most part to get your Bachelor of Art degree. Most people in the U.S. have tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. So the whole thing is debt-based. So even raising the interest rates, this is where all the panic comes in when they say we might raise interest rates 0.25%, which should not even matter at all. That's how indebted the entire society is, including private people and government and corporations. And so if they even raise interest rates at all, the whole thing will collapse. So that's where we're at right now. And so, yes, this next collapse will be the big one. There will be no easy way to get out of this one. The best way to prepare, of course, is what I've been talking about. Own some gold, silver, some cryptocurrencies. Be careful with the cryptocurrencies. They're volatile, but own some of them for sure. Own some hard land, as you brought up. That's one of the best sort of things to own. Real hard assets that they can't inflate away and that won't disappear when this entire house of cards comes tumbling down.
Jeff, there's some bastards, aren't they? They're constantly harassing people. I was speaking to a senior lady, a neighbour of mine the other day, and she doesn't listen to the programme. She's not aware of the programme, but she was talking to me about, we were talking about the economy, we were talking about the news, and she said, I'm always getting these letters about releasing some equity in my house. And before she even said anything, I said, listen, don't ever, and she said, she stopped me and she said, you don't need to educate me, I would never do that. I said, this releasing equity in your house, getting you to take out a loan on your house, it's insane. They want your house. It's just unbelievable. And, you know, I rent the property we live in here in Manchester. The banks in the city don't know that. So there's an avalanche of literature coming through about releasing some equity. Do you own your property? Release some equity. It's never ending, Jeff. And I wanted to ask you something as well. On the one hand, you have this planned crash. On the other hand, Jeff, people like you and others who've been doing your work for years, writing your articles, educating people for years, we have this tyranny developing in the UK, this crackdown on social media, Jeff. The Prime Minister of the country today talked about we need to tackle hate speech, we need to change the discourse. And Jeff, before you came on tonight, I interviewed a man who used to be a Labour Party councillor. And would you believe, Jeff, a couple of weeks ago, 2 police officers knocked on his door and asked to be left inside. Why? Because he had written a critical post about his local council on Facebook. A post that wasn't derogatory or defamatory or insightful in any way. It was just a post, and the police came to warn him about his conduct on social media. I'm not making that up. It was in the national press today. This is what's coming down. while they're planning what they're planning, Jeff, they're also planning to stop guys like you getting the word out. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. This has been going on for years. This was really the first crack, the first issue that these elites had was the internet, because for the first time in the 1990s, people had the ability to communicate and to actually get information that was outside of the mainstream media. It's taken them a long time to figure out how to really slow that down. They're starting to get a lot better at it now, of course, with Google really censoring a lot of stuff, Facebook really shadow banning, and actually Facebook just recently said they're not allowing anyone to even post about cryptocurrencies anymore and things like that. So all kinds of censorship things. And then, of course, you have the other thing, like a lot of the false flag attacks that they constantly are doing to scare people. They're in the UK, right after a couple of them where they, whether it's false flag hoax or even if it was real, but the ones I saw didn't look real whatsoever, but like, real in terms of what they said it was. Just like 9/11, they said it was one thing, but it was another thing. But right after that, Theresa May came out and said, we have to shut down the internet because that's how they communicated about how they were going to drive over some people down the street is on the internet. So therefore, we have to shut it down. Even Donald Trump, the great person that a lot of people seem to think is some great person, has also talked about, he said even before he got elected, he said, we have to figure out a way to shut down this internet. We have to keep people from having access to information. So yeah, they talk about these sort of things all the time. This is, another big thing that they do. They really make it so a lot of people who are putting a lot of truth out there just cannot get, no one can see it on the internet. And again, Richie, this is where we create new systems that they can't stop. So there's actually cryptocurrencies out there that are actually social media networks based on a blockchain. There's one in particular that everyone should remember this. It's called Steemit.com, STEEMIT.com. And you sign up on there and you just start posting on there. You actually get paid in cryptocurrency if people like your post. So this is very different than Facebook, where you can post whatever, you never get a penny from it. They actually sell the advertising and make all the profit from it. It's very different. Plus, you can't censor it because it's based on a blockchain. So as soon as someone posts something on there, you cannot remove it. There's no place to go to remove it because it's on too many computers across the world to be able to go with all the governments and shut them all down. So again, this is what I'm talking about. We're creating all these new systems that will get around and make their systems obsolete. So no matter how hard they try to censor it, there's even cryptocurrencies out there that are trying to create their own internet on top of the internet, which will be all based on a blockchain that they can't actually censor or shut down anything. These are all things that are in process right now. And as you pointed out, it is a race, and we'll see who wins at the end of the day. But absolutely, they are trying to censor and shut down anyone who has an alternative narrative to what you see on your mainstream media, which, as you pointed out earlier, is nothing even close to the truth. It's at best an infomercial, and really what it is for the most part is propaganda. It's
propaganda. Absolutely dumb you down, make you believe that the left-right paradigm is the only way and is the right way. You're absolutely right. Steemit is very interesting. It is really interesting, Steemit. I've been looking at it recently, and I'm going to look really hard at it in terms of the content that I put online. I do love, though, the old-fashioned websites, Jeff. I know where to find Jeff Berwick. I know dollarvigilante.com. The articles are there. Nobody can stop me doing that. Now, if I was to be spending all my time on Facebook, I know that even though I follow you and others on Facebook, I know I'm not going to see your posts because you're being shadow banned and all of that. But I love the websites. We recently put a decent website online for the Richie Allen Show, richieallen.co.uk, and I'm kind of banging on my listeners' heads, Jeff, to say don't expect to see news about the Richie Allen Show on Facebook. Go to richieallen.co.uk, go to dollarvigilante.com. What's Jeff saying? Right, I'll have a look, dollarvigilante.com. We need to have our own websites, Jeff.
Yeah, that's just a really basic thing that you definitely people should be doing. And another very basic thing is have your own email list, because that's very, very hard for them to stop. They could, if I was saying enough stuff that they really wanted to get rid of me, they would just say I did child pornography or something. That's what they always say whenever they want to take someone down. And then they'd come in with their warrants and their subpoenas, and they'd shut down the web host where my website's hosted, right? So they can do stuff like that. But if you have your own email list, even if they did that, I could still get out my information. So I don't know if you do that, Richie, but if you don't, you should definitely do it. And you should be sending out an email, once a week or whatever, updating your audience on what's going on, because as you pointed out, they're not going to be seeing it on Facebook or on a Google search very often.
Jeff, we're rapidly running out of time. That's flown by. It always does. I want to ask you before we do. Thanks for coming back, by the way. It's been too long, and I mean that, Jeff. I don't say stuff like that. I really do mean it. You should be on more often. We're always delighted to have you on the programme. Tell us about Anarchapulco, Jeff. It's very soon. It's imminent, in fact. It's hugely successful. I've heard from people who've attended it over the last couple of years. They love it. What's happening this year?
Yeah, absolutely. So Anarchapulco is the world's first anarcho-capitalist or voluntarist, essentially a true libertarian conference where we believe in complete freedom for people, which means if you believe in freedom, you can't believe in government because government's based on extortion and violence, essentially. It was the first one. We started 4 years ago. It started off very small. It was about 100 people. The second year was about 350 people. The third year, last year, was about 600 people. And this year, we actually sold out. We were not expecting at all, but apparently this Liberty stuff is starting to catch on. We sold out at about 1,500 people, so it's actually sold out. It's from February 15th to the 18th. We also have one full day on cryptocurrencies, and the reason that I really think the conference is important, Richie, is because a lot of the people who are speaking at the conference are all doing those things that I have been talking about. They're building new systems that make the old systems obsolete without a shot fired. As you may know, a lot of if you watch the television programming or listen to governments, they will tell you these anarchists, they're very dangerous, they're going to blow stuff up. And yes, there was some anarchists in history who did those sort of things. They thought that was the way to get rid of government, but really that's not the way, because the real true belief in anarchy is self-ownership. That has nothing to do with blowing stuff up or killing people, killing government people. Really, the only way that we can get this philosophy out there more is to create new systems that just make the old systems obsolete. So the entire conference is really all about that, and I think that's why it's become quite popular, Richie. And just so people out there know, it is sold out, but you can actually watch the entire conference on a live stream that we're going to be doing. It's anarchapulco.com/livestream, so you can check that out. And the day after, actually, the conference is a Dollar Vigilante Summit, where we'll be talking all about this economic and financial and cryptocurrencies and gold and what's going on in the world and how to protect yourself and profit. And that actually isn't sold out. So you could come to Acapulco, watch the live stream by the pool, hang out with everyone at night with all of the crazy parties that happen here, and then after that go to the Dollar Vigilante Summit as well.
It sounds brilliant. Don't tempt me. Anarchapulco.com/livestream and dollarvigilante.com for all the information. Brilliant stuff, Jeff. It's a tonic. What I love about the conference is it's solution-based speakers. They're offering solutions. They have solutions. They're in the process of presenting and manufacturing solutions. I love it. Thanks for your time today, my friend. Brilliant to catch up with you again. You're welcome back anytime. Cheers, Jeff.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Richie.
Thanks. That's the brilliant Dollar Vigilante himself, Jeff Berwick. What a top man Jeff is, live from Acapulco. Go to anarchapulco.com/livestream to find out more about the live stream, but all the information is also linked on dollarvigilante.com.
The market is shaking. The mood has darkened. Blood is running in the streets. Bitcoins, altcoins, and stocks are under attack. Do you buy, sell, or hold? Do you move into gold, cash, or something else? What stocks and coins will win, and which will drop to zero? If you're feeling uncertain, nervous, or scared, you're not alone. Many expert investors wonder what's next. But you can escape. And more than 12 of the top liberty-minded investment experts in the world will hand you the key. For one day only, financial wizards like G. Edward Griffin, Roger Ver, Simon Dixon, Jeff Berwick, Ed Bugos, Bix Weir, David Morgan, Mike Maloney, and more will team up to turn your fear into unshakable confidence while you enjoy the beautiful Acapulco, Mexico sunshine. But you have to act now. The 2018 TDV Internationalization and Investment Summit is filling fast. The exclusive advice about money, precious metals, stocks, investing, cryptocurrencies, internationalizing of assets, and permanent traveler and prior taxpayer lifestyles you learn will give you the confidence to diversify and profit and survive and thrive, no matter what 2018 throws your way. Time is running out to register for the TDV Internationalization and Investment Summit. So visit dollarvigilante.com/2018 Summit for details. Unfortunately, Anarchapulco 2018 sold out, but there's still time to join other liberty-minded investors watching the live stream by the pool and getting primed for the powerful strategies you'll learn at the 2018 Summit. Visit dollarvigilante.com/2018 Summit to learn more now before it's too late.